I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor for this night and all the nights to come.
Today we talk about the Paladin in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Greetings, squires. My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes.
Today we're going to take a look at the Paladin class in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
We're going to cover everything you need to know to create your Paladin in your next Dungeons & Dragons campaign. We're going to look at the various build options, class features, spells, and other choices that you can make to prepare your Paladin to fight the forces of evil.
We're also going to get you inspired by looking at famous paladins from history, books, TV shows, movies, as well as look at some role-playing options for your paladin oaths, backgrounds, and personality.
With that, let's get rolling.
So Monty, why would we play a paladin?
Well, with the paladin, you get to play as the classic righteous warrior.
Yeah, the paladin gets their divine powers from a sacred oath.
Yeah, and these powers give them all sorts of abilities. They can smite evildoers, they can protect the innocent, heal the wounded, and even are granted blessings that can inspire their allies in battle.
Yeah, they really are a righteous hero with like fire, divine powers, smiting, and all of that. They really can stand up to the evils of the world.
Yeah, and in that respect, no other class in the game lets you live that fantasy of being the true hero who is willing to fight with fire and steel against the forces of darkness.
So not only is the Paladin really, really great in combat, but they also are a really good team player because of their auras, magic, and general charisma.
Yeah, in fact, the Paladin is the perfect party leader. And if you're interested in role-playing the archetypes around leadership, you not only get the ability scores that line up with that, but you really get the role-playing motivation and the inbound duty that comes with being a leader of other people. And so if you love being the hero, you love being the leader, being a more socially minded warrior as well, you really get that with the Paladin.
So what about the Paladin's role in the party?
Well, in combat, they really are amazing damage dealers.
Yeah. I think we've both played Paladins. We've
Yep.
both been able to absolutely wreck enemies with their abilities in combat.
The thing that I will say about the Paladin as a damage dealer is that they are a fantastic single hit. And over the course of a very long adventuring day, they might not do the reliable damage that a barbarian or a rogue or even a fighter will do. But as far as the single massive blow that brings down your enemies, the fighter has nothing on what a Paladin can achieve.
In combat, they can hit really hard, but they also have really cool things like auras and spells that can really kind of bolster the party, help everybody out, and make them really tough as well as hitting so hard.
Yeah, I mean, Paladins themselves wear heavy armor, so they're right there on the front lines. They've got lots of hit points. They're quite resilient in that regard. But then they also bring additional healing powers like lay on hands and healing spells. But things like Aura of Protection, which boost the entire party's saving throws, or spells like Bless, which increase everyone's accuracy and defensive capabilities, really make the Paladin kind of like that anchor of the entire party. Everyone kind of forms up around the Paladin, gets the benefits of all their protective ability, and lets the Paladin lead the charge.
So what about in exploration?
Well, Paladins have a few really unique abilities here. The first being Divine Sense, which actually lets them detect the presence of nearby fiends and undead creatures, which it's surprising how useful this ability can be in investigating situations, because you can see the presence of supernatural evil meddling in the world.
Yeah, it's one of those abilities that in the right campaign, they almost can lead the party by knowing when they're entering desecrated or consecrated ground, understanding what kind of enemies might be in the area. There's a lot that you can do with that in the right setting.
So now that we've covered exploration, how do Paladins do in social interaction?
Well, the great thing about Paladins is their spellcasting ability is charisma, which means that you're going to have high charisma. So a charismatic character is going to be excellent in social interactions. You're going to probably have either persuasion or something of that sort.
Or intimidation.
Or intimidation, depending on the paladin you're playing.
Yeah.
But that means that they can really be the face of the party. So not only are they great in combat, they have exploration tools, but now also with that high charisma, they can walk into a social interaction. They're usually, I would say the paladins are usually a diplomatic sort of character.
Yeah, I
in
think
most cases.
I think unlike maybe a rogue or a bard or other high charisma characters that might favor deception or even be willing to, really try to control the social interaction, a paladin is a great character to role play those honest social interactions or the ones where you need to negotiate with someone over very tense circumstances. They make a great party face and representative in that regard.
So let's look at some of the great inspirations from history, books, and various other sources.
Perhaps the example that we can draw inspiration on from the Paladin are the chivalric knights of the Round Table, those that served the legendary King Arthur. Whether you're looking at heroes like Galahad or Gawain, or even Lancelot, whose honor was tested by his lust for Guinevere. There's all sorts of great inspirations for both flawed heroes and brave knights amongst those really great legends. And if you're going even to the real world examples, paladins really draw heavily from traditions of knighthood that emerged in Europe and around the world. And I think that outside of just like looking at European traditions of like the Crusaders or the Knights Templar or the Teutonic Knights, you can even look internationally and even say, well, maybe samurai are quite a lot like paladins in many regards.
I can see that.
And draw inspiration from kind of those oath-bound warrior castes that emerged in virtually every human culture at some point.
If we want to look at some other great examples of paladins, specifically ones from like film and television, I immediately think of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Kind of a weird one to throw in there because you don't immediately think of her like she's not wearing heavy armor, running in, yelling divine stuff, but she's
still a badass warrior with a sword on a mission.
Badass warrior. She's on a mission. She is kind of a religious oath in a way of like smiting evil.
Yeah.
Specifically like killing vampires, which are undead, and that's very paladin.
Big part of the paladin. Definitely fighting against fiends, undead. But, paladins also have the notion of fighting against the forces of darkness and that balance of light and darkness. And where else do we find that but in the universes of Star Wars?
Yes, Star Wars has a lot of great paladins. Luke Skywalker is pretty much a paladin.
Yeah, I think looking at the original films, the Jedi are way closer to paladins than monks.
Yeah.
And Darth Vader himself is an archetype of the fallen paladin.
Yeah.
Right?
They're the religious group of people that have their awesome swords, their holy powers, their divine smiting.
Yep.
It's all in there.
It's all there. The reason why Luke Skywalker is a paladin is that archetypal notion of taking up your father's sword and the deep betrayal that a paladin feels when their family comes into conflict with their noble goals. Luke Skywalker is totally a paladin in that respect, right?
And if you want role-playing ideas, there's a great, you just take that little nugget and there's your backstory.
Yeah, right? It's a classic thing to be a paladin and only to find that you are a blood relation of the evildoer.
Another great example, and I always like to throw Game of Thrones in here, but Brienne of Tarth literally swears an oath and has her sword. The oath, it's the Oathkeeper?
Yeah, which she renames. Yeah.
So basically, she's bound by an oath to protect and to smite the people who would wrong the order in which she's protecting.
Yeah, and of course we did quote the Oath of the Night's Watch at the top of the episode, even though the Rangers of the Night's Watch aren't quite paladins in their abilities.
Yeah, but that's
being bound by an oath is such a paladin thing, and we really looked for characters that are all about that and swearing on a mission serving a higher purpose. So let's get into how we might build our paladin in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition.
Yeah, the paladin is actually pretty straightforward once you kind of make those key choices.
Yeah, in fact, the gameplay of the paladin is pretty consistent, starting around 2nd level. And once you get the hang of how everything works, everything just kind of builds on it as you level up. But you have to make a couple key decisions really early on. So let's take a look at those and see how we might build our character.
So as a paladin, you get a D10 hit die, which makes you pretty hefty. Not only that, but you get all of the armor, so light, medium, and heavy.
And shields.
And you get martial and simple weapons. So you get kind of your pick of what you want your paladin to be using here.
Yeah, for skills, you get to pick 2. These are going to include skills like athletics, insight, intimidation, medicine, persuasion, and religion. I really like to take athletics with my paladin.
Yeah.
And oftentimes your pick of intimidation or persuasion are good choices off the top. You get wisdom and charisma saving throws. This is actually a little bit of a weak spot for the paladin on paper, but you're going to get some later abilities that are really going to improve the way your saving throws work. Now, paladins are spellcasters, but they're considered secondary spellcasters. They don't learn any cantrips, and they don't gain their 1st level spell slots until they're paladin's 2nd level. As they gain paladin levels, they'll eventually get up to 5th level spell slots, but instead of gaining a new spell level every other class level, like most other classes do that are primary spellcasters, paladins only gain a new spell level about every 4 levels. So you've got far fewer spell slots than you would as a primary caster.
Yeah, and as a paladin, you get to use charisma to determine your spell save DC and your spell attack modifier, which I always like charisma-based spellcaster.
Because there's 4 other classes and it makes for really good multi-classing.
Yeah.
Now, as a paladin, you can prepare any spell on the paladin spell list. You get to choose a number equal to your charisma modifier plus 1/2 your paladin level, rounded down. Of course, paladins also gain additional spells that are always prepared based on their sacred oath. So you do get a fair number of spells that you prepared. It's just that usually over half of them are going to be chosen for you.
So as a paladin, you also get to choose a fighting style. There's a few great options in here. You have dueling for one-handed weapons, and you can have nothing in your other hand, or you can have a shield. You have defense, which gives you a +1 to your AC. You have great weapon fighting, which lets you re-roll 1s and 2s on your damage for your double-handed weapon.
Yeah.
And then we have protection.
Which is a useful little ability that lets you impose disadvantage as a reaction when someone next to you is attacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, I think probably most paladins are going to pick to go with the 2-handed weapons.
I love it. It's just so smashy.
But I think that bonuses to AC are really, really rare in 5th edition. So that +1 AC is a really great choice if you think you're going to be switching weapons.
So with all of these things that we've looked at in mind, what ability scores do we want to pick for our paladin?
Well, straight up, we've got heavy weapons, heavy armor. Gotta go with strength.
Yeah, strength is just going to allow you to carry the biggest weapons, carry the heaviest armor. You are a secondary spellcaster, so spellcasting is more or less your second option, whereas strength, you're going to be mostly in combat.
Yeah, I think that your charisma score is going to be your second highest ability score after your strength, because it powers so many paladin abilities, but that strength score is going to come into play with every single attack, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing like a point buy or something like that, putting those highest numbers in strength and charisma is probably the way to go, with constitution being your third option, because again, you get proficiency in constitution saving throws as a paladin, but you're going to be taking a lot of hits on the front line, and you're going to want to be able to make those concentration checks.
For bless.
Yeah. You will eventually, the cool thing about it is that because your charisma score will eventually apply to all your saving throws, thanks to Aura of Protection, you kind of win out there, but you still want the extra hit points from con.
Yeah.
There is a viable alternative, though, of having a high dexterity instead of a high strength.
Yeah, because there is the option of having the sword and shield
Yeah.
paladin. And if you are using a finesse weapon, maybe you throw on a little bit lighter armor or medium armor, you have that shield, you're still going to have a great AC, but you might want to look at dexterity, which can help with like dodging things here and there, as well as being able to be good in combat.
Yeah, it gives you a more balanced spread on your saving throws, a higher initiative. Unfortunately, you can't use Divine Smite on a ranged attack. So the notion of doing an Archer Paladin doesn't quite work. But if you do, it still gives you a good option for ranged weapons.
After that, we have wisdom and intelligence, which I think are mostly dependent on how you want to role play your paladin.
Yeah, I think that there's this notion with a paladin, you want to have a good wisdom score to temper your zealous tendencies.
Yeah.
Right? Again, feeding into that idea that discretion is the better part of valor. But you also have a leadership role to play. And there's a benefit to being an intelligent leader, right? So I think that how you see your paladin as more of a source of wisdom and as more of a soldier on the front lines of battle versus a leader is going to drive you between wisdom and intelligence.
So why don't we talk about some of the best races in D&D to play a paladin?
So I want to say that when we were looking at this, it's surprising how many races make really good paladins.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few options.
Yeah.
One of the first ones that pops into my head is the dwarf.
Yes, indeed. The mountain dwarf with a +2 bonus to strength and a +2 bonus to constitution. All the right bonuses in the right places. Dark vision, poison resistance. Dwarves make iconic paladins.
So another one that I really like is the half-elf. You get a +2 to charisma, which is going to be your spellcasting modifier.
Yep.
And then you get a +1 to 2 other skills of your choice.
Boost your strength and con.
Yeah, so already you're well off. They have dark vision, and they get extra skills as well.
Which is surprisingly helpful because the paladin only gets a 2 skills base plus their background. So getting those extra skills really helps diversify your paladin, especially in the exploration and social interaction side of things.
Yeah. What about the variant human? We talk about that one a lot.
It's always strong.
It is.
Yeah, and in particular, the paladin is kind of feat starved. Because with a paladin, because you want a high strength and a high charisma, and you probably want to take Polearm Master, Great Weapon Master, Warcaster, and all these other really good feats, the variant human getting an extra feat off the top makes it a lot easier to manage all the different ability scores and feats that you want to pick up as a paladin and get them sooner. I think that that's one of the things that really makes it difficult to make a choice with your ability score increases as a paladin, because you're really torn between a lot of different options.
Yeah. I also want to throw out an honorable mention to the Dragonborn, the Half-Orc, and the Tiefling.
Yeah, and there's a few reasons why this is. In Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, there's new options for Tieflings that they can actually get a strength bonus or a constitution bonus instead of that int bonus. And also, I just love the idea of a Tiefling Paladin. It's a really cool concept.
And I myself played the Half-Orc Paladin,
Yep.
and I mean, just the guy that wouldn't get knocked down.
For the relentless endurance for a paladin, like paladins get taken out a lot, and being able to stand back up again as a half-orc was amazing.
Yeah.
That came up so many times in our campaign. And a half-orc paladin is much like the tiefling, has this whole thing of like having a darker past and something that they might want to rise above depending on how orcs are seen in your setting.
So why don't we take a look at the biggest choice you're going to have to make for your paladin, and that is which oath they're going to swear to.
Your sacred oath is character defining, not only because it gives you so many abilities and spellcasting features that will really change the way your paladin plays, but it also defines your character's outlook and personality. Your oath is something that defines who your paladin is at their very being, and something that they are upheld and beholden to.
So there's a whole bunch of oaths to choose from, especially with all the new books that have come out. The Player's Handbook gives us 3.
Yeah, and those are the Oath of the Ancients, the Oath of Devotion, and the Oath of Vengeance.
Yeah, and then in Xanathar's, you get the Oath of Conquest and the Oath of Redemption.
Yeah, and there's two other oaths that might have escaped your notice, which is the Oath of the Crown, which was in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. And the Dungeon Master's Guide also presents the Oath Breaker, which is an option for fallen paladins.
So each oath is going to give you a few really awesome things here. You get a dedicated spell list for the oath that you've chosen.
Yeah, these are 2 spells of each spell level that you always have prepared.
You also get class abilities at 3rd level, 7th level, 15th level, and 20th level.
Yeah, the 20th level feature is usually some sort of like holy apotheosis ability where you grow wings or get like this badass aura that lasts for the rest of the combat encounter.
Yeah, and then each one also gets their own channel divinity ability.
Yeah, and some of these are really, really amazing as well.
Yeah. So the first oath that we're going to take a look at is the Oath of the Ancients, which is swearing that oath to your ancestors.
Yeah, you're looking to protect the sacred places of the world, and you're swearing your oath really to uphold the memory and legacy of your ancestors, to inherit the mantle of being a protector. And as a result of that, you actually gain quite a lot of powers that make you gain druid spells and druid-like abilities as a paladin.
Yeah, they draw a lot from kind of that love of nature, that love of the earth. So they do have a lot of parallels. If you want to play a paladin, but you love the kind of nature aspects of the druid and some of their spells, you get a lot of that here.
Makes it a great choice for elves in particular. I love this idea of playing like an Eladrin Oath of the Ancients paladin with a couple levels in Warlock as a Fey pack that's kind of like a Witch Knight.
Yeah.
Right? And the defensive abilities of this oath are great.
Yeah.
Because you get a boost to your aura of protection that gives all of your allies resistance to damage from spells. Next up is the Oath of Devotion, which is very much the classic paladin sworn to uphold the cause of a deity, usually a deity of justice.
Yeah, this paladin's kind of your bread and butter paladin with their turn undead and their kind of just righteous abilities here. Yeah,
you are the holy paladin in this respect. You get a few spells from the cleric spell list that really boost that kind of idea of a knight hospitalier. So more of the healing abilities are bolstered. The turn undead abilities are bolstered as well. And you get a really great boost to protect your party from charm spells, which can be really useful when you're fighting fiends that want to mind control you.
And next up, we have my personal favorite, the Oath of Vengeance. The Oath of Vengeance is for the paladin who wants to smash everything, hit really hard. You swear that oath to kind of like defeat your foes and just like bring vengeance down on them.
This is all about justice at any cost.
Yeah.
Right? And it really feels like the oath that is the most unshackled of all the other oaths. Like many of the Oath of Devotion and the Oath of the Ancients really have this calling of a higher duty. Whereas with the Oath of Vengeance, you are swearing to do what must be done.
Yeah, it's the nitty gritty. You don't need to feel like you're that righteous warrior. Maybe you're just the person who's out there to smite evil, and so you've been given divine powers. Yeah, so in the Oath of Vengeance, you get Misty Step, Hold Person, Haste. There's some really other cool ones here.
Like Hunter's Mark and Scrying.
Yeah.
Like you can find them, take them down, and getting Hunter's Mark on a paladin is a great way to get more mileage out of your spells as well. Get more damage from it too, because that Hunter's Mark will last a whole battle, whereas that first level smite is only going to be a couple extra points of damage early on, right? The other really big thing with the Oath of Vengeance is the Vow of Enmity channel divinity option, which just gives you flat out advantage on attacks against one enemy for 1 minute.
Yeah, the Oath of Vengeance is just your smitey paladin.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the Oath of Conquest.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an interesting twist on the Oath of Vengeance because this one is about being a master of the battlefield. It's from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And the Oath of Conquest, if the Oath of Vengeance kind of twists like focuses and twists the ideals of the paladin towards vengeance, the Oath of Conquest really pushes it towards domination, and it's probably the darkest of the paladin oaths.
Yeah.
Because it really is about fear and domination. In fact, you get Dominate Person as a spell and a whole bunch of channel divinity options that actually terrify your foes.
I picture the Conquest Paladin as that, like, gritty knight who's running out onto the battlefield. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or even a straight up evil paladin. The next one, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, is the Oath of Redemption, also from Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Yeah, and that kind of flips on the Conquest one.
Yeah. The Oath of Redemption is a peacekeeper who really believes that no one is beyond saving, right?
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, and they get a lot of... this is a hard one to roleplay, though, too, because just as problematic as it can be to be a paladin that just wants to smite everything and will rush ahead to defeat evil... Being someone that is like, no, let's talk it out. We don't want to fight. I don't want to kill anybody. Can actually be really difficult to roleplay with a party depending on what way your party leans.
Yeah, that can be really tough because, I mean, like, in every D&D campaign, there's situations where you're going to fight monsters. So if they think that everybody can be saved, are they going to try to save every goblin?
That's an interesting role-playing conundrum. It's an awesome oath because you get sleep, you get counterspell, Hypnotic Pattern, and Wall of Force.
All really cool.
It's really interesting. This is one of the few paladin oaths that I could actually see wanting to make your charisma your highest ability score, because you want to talk through those situations, and your spells are so good. Finally, we have the Oath of the Crown, which is in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. This one is a paladin that has sworn an oath to a nation, to serve the king, to serve the queen, to serve the land that they're protecting. And in this way, they're a little bit of a duelist. They get a lot of protective abilities that let them compel duels and things like that. I find that this one's a very lackluster oath, and I think that I would only choose it for your paladin if you really have a specific image in your mind, and feel that the abilities line up with what you want to roleplay with your paladin, because I think that the other oaths are far stronger.
And it's unfortunate because I actually really like the idea of the paladin who's like fighting for their king or their lord.
Yeah.
And I love that idea, but yeah, it doesn't shine as much as some of the other oaths to me.
All paladins get a whole bunch of really useful abilities, from their aura of protection, which bolsters the saving throws of both the paladin and their allies around it, which is probably their best defensive feature. But on the flip side, everyone's here for one thing.
Divine Smite. And if you are anything like me, you're basically going to blow all of your spell slots using Divine Smite to just wreak havoc on your enemies.
Let's look at why this is. Starting at 2nd level, your paladin gains the ability to expend a spell slot when you hit a creature with a melee attack. When you do this, you add 2d8 points of radiant damage to the damage roll of your attack. You can choose to expend a higher level spell slot to gain additional d8s. So you get 3d8 from a 2nd level spell slot, all the way up to 5d8, which is the cap, if you use a 4th level spell slot.
And then on top of that, if you are fighting undead or fiends, you get an additional d8 as well.
And finally, at 11th level, your paladin gets improved Divine Smite, which means they always add a d8 to every melee attack they make that hits. So this means that the absolute cap, if you're a high-level paladin that uses a 4th level spell slot to smite, is 7d8 extra radiant damage on a single melee hit.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot of damage. The other great thing about Divine Smite is you don't actually have to announce you're using it until after you've landed the hit.
The amount of damage that you can deal with a paladin using Divine Smite is staggering. And in fact, it gets even better because paladins have a bevy of special smite spells. Most of these spells are deal damage, just like a Divine Smite does, but they usually have an additional rider effect, like Searing Smite that does fire damage, or even Banishing Smite that banishes the target.
Yeah, and you can use these in conjunction with Divine Smite?
It's a little outrageous.
Yeah.
So, because you cast the Smite spells as a bonus action, And then they apply to the next attack you make that hits. You cast the smite spell, make your attack. If that attack hits, you can still apply your regular divine smite on top of the spell that you use to smite with.
Unreal.
It's a lot of damage. Be aware that all of the divine smite spells also require your concentration. So if you're concentrating on another spell like Bless or one of the great aura spells that paladins get, using one of these spells does eat up that concentration, which is why typically you see that one really big hit all put together where the paladin's like Searing Smite, Divine Smite, bam, and then it happens on a critical hit.
Yeah. So let's look at the paladin's spell casting.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of this already.
Yeah.
And so I think that the biggest thing is that because paladins only get up to 5th level spells, they get a very slow number of slow progression through the spell levels. You really want to make some choice options. And I think for my mileage, your best spells are probably going to come from your oath.
Yeah, I found that when I was playing the Paladin, I chose a bunch of spells that I didn't use all that much compared to the ones that I got from my oath that I chose. Those ones I was using all the time.
Yeah, Misty Step and Hunter's Mark were pretty much your bread and butter when you were playing Dragnin.
And really, my spell slots after that were mostly just used for Divine Smites.
Yeah, that said, there's still a few things that you'll want to bring along. I find it's useful for every Paladin to always prepare Bless. It's such a good spell.
It's so key.
And really, yeah, I prefer using my first level spell slots for that because it really, like, the swing in saving throws and attack rolls that you bring as a Paladin, like, combining Bless, which is D4 to saving throws, plus your Aura of Protection, which will be your Charisma mod to saving throws for your allies that are close to you, you can basically make your party invulnerable to spells because of that saving throw swing. I also think it's useful to bring spells like Aid. You might want to bring Lesser Restoration or Cure Wounds.
Yeah, you definitely want a few healing spells in there. As a paladin, sometimes you are the healer of the party.
Yeah.
So it is pretty key to have a few of those.
Yeah, and Lay on Hands gives you a good basis of healing to rely on, but sometimes it is nice to just prepare Cure Wounds in case there's an absolute emergency situation. The most important spell I think that you can bring as a paladin is probably Find Steed.
Yeah, so you always can summon your awesome horse to your side.
Yeah, and eventually getting Fine Greater Steed and getting a Griffin or a Pegasus or something like that is going to be super awesome. So you have a flying mount. And that's probably a reason alone to even consider like a feat like Mounted Combatant.
So now let's get into role-playing our paladin. There's a lot of really cool questions that we can ask here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really cool ways to role-play it. A lot of people see the paladin as a very two-dimensional, righteous, holy character, but there's a lot of ways that you can branch out from that.
Yeah, from lawful good is lawful great, or lawful good doesn't mean lawful nice. Alignment often comes up in discussions with paladins, which is interesting for us because we're not huge fans of bothering with alignment that much. But I still think that the principles of your paladin, their moral code, and indeed their oath, are such a defining part of playing a paladin.
Yeah, and I think one of the coolest questions to ask is how were they granted the divine powers? How did they swear their oath, and what does that oath mean to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my campaign worlds, the Archangel Michael visits every single paladin and bestows them with their powers, regardless of their oath, regardless of their creed or nation or where they came from. Every paladin is visited by an angel to get their powers. And there is this common bond that all paladins share. So maybe your paladin actually is part of a knightly order, and they were raised up through it, and they have a very codified oath.
I remember when I was going to play my paladin, I wanted to try to flip the whole idea of the common paladin over and try to come up with a way to make a paladin that wasn't typical.
Yeah.
And so I had a paladin who was a criminal and was in jail, but had a very strong hatred for demons. And so the angel visited him and said, hey, we'll let you out of this prison. We'll give you divine powers if you promise to use it to smite demons. And I was like, that's everything I want to do. So he wasn't actually like the best guy.
Yeah.
He just happened to be something that the angels saw they could use as a tool to vanquish evil.
There's something to be said for having an oath that you can speak in the midst of battle, right?
Always feels cool to
yeah.
like yell out your oath while running into combat. I think of the Boondock Saints who run in and like they have that oath that they speak every time they're about to kill somebody.
Or I think of like in like things like 13th Warrior where you're like, lo, there do I see my father, right? And you can say this as your paladin draws their sword and the flames lick up the blade and they're ready to like take on this demon lord with bravery.
One really tricky part about role-playing a paladin is that if you are playing this righteous character, this character who wants to do good in the world, but you're in a party with like a rogue criminal and like a charlatan and like all of these kind of shady characters.
So many new groups really struggle with this when you get that one player that wants to play the righteous paladin that wants to do the right thing in a party of scoundrels. Right? And or even just the paladin that's very headstrong and zealous in a party of characters that have a little bit more discretion, right? And just don't, maybe they're not even evil, but they just don't want to jump in head first like the paladin does. And I think that when you make these choices as a player, it's really important to step away for a moment and talk with your other friends that are sitting around you at the table and make sure that everyone's on board with this. Because the paladin is unfortunately like the rogue. It's one of those classes that is unfortunately prone to role-playing conflicts within the party.
Well, if you want to look at a great example of a paladin and a rogue becoming best friends, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo.
Exactly.
They didn't get along at first, but they still were forced to work together, and they didn't backstab each other or anything. There was the bit of conflict, like, you're only in this for the money, and he's like, yeah, of course I am. But by the end of it, they relied on each other, and they became really close, even though one was a scoundrel and one was a righteous warrior.
And I think the image of the rogue and the paladin as a team is such a powerful image, actually, in fiction, that it's really worth making, like, if you have a rogue in your party, you have a scoundrel in your party, make your two characters best friends and have that be the conflict that you explore through positive role-playing rather than being that something that gets you into fights all the time with each other. With a paladin, you want allies in the fight against the true evil, which will threaten to devour the world. A paladin needs to understand that petty infighting is only a tool that the forces of evil are using against you in your quest. Rise above it, come together, and fight for the truth and justice in the world.
So this has been our guide to the Paladin class in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We hope that you feel inspired to fight with honor and justice.
And we would love to hear in your comments below your ideas for paladins that have inspired you or the awesome paladin characters that you've played in your campaigns.
And if you want to check out the feat for Polar Master, we have a video on that right up over here.
And if the paladin isn't quite for you, check out our other class guides right over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.